Empty doorways stare out from canyon walls, holding secrets of forgotten genius. These abandoned cities are not just ruins, they are open-air textbooks of architectural wisdom lost for millennia. By the end of this journey, you will see these silent stones as a vital blueprint for our own future, offering solutions to modern challenges of climate and resource scarcity. Why were such sophisticated engineering principles completely forgotten? And what can a city carved into a cliff possibly teach us about building better lives today? The answers lie in the wind-swept canyons of Mesa Verde, the rose-red facades of Petra, and the deep underground labyrinths of Cappadocia. What do you believe is the most important lesson we have forgotten from the ancient world? These urban centers represent a distinct and brilliant category of human settlement. A canyon city is far more than a collection of homes tucked into a convenient alcove. It is a fully integrated, multi-story community engineered directly into the living rock of a cliff face, using the canyon itself as its primary building material and defensive structure. Think of it not as constructing a city, but as sculpting one from the inside out. The natural overhangs and recesses of the canyon provided a ready-made foundation, a sheltering roof, and a formidable barrier. This was architecture in harmony with geology, where the boundary between the built environment and the natural world was deliberately blurred. From the intricate apartment-like complexes of Mesa Verde in the American Southwest to the vast, ornate facades carved into the rose-red mountains of Petra in Jordan, and the entire underground networks of Cappadocia in Turkey, we see the same brilliant adaptation. Each site is a unique answer to a universal challenge. The driving forces behind their creation were often severe and non-negotiable. The need for security in a turbulent landscape, the relentless demand for stable temperatures in extreme climates, and the constant, pressing puzzle of how to collect and conserve every precious doorway. Every window was placed with an understanding of the sun's daily and seasonal journey across the sky. This teaches us that true sustainability isn't merely about adding solar panels to a poorly designed box. It begins with this fundamental act of listening to the land. It is a lesson in humility and observation that much of our modern cookie-cutter development has utterly forgotten, prioritizing speed and uniformity over a deep, site-specific dialogue with the environment. The stability and efficiency they achieved through this harmony leads us directly to their second, equally brilliant innovation, one that turned the very bones of the Earth into a perfect climate control system. The cool stillness inside a cliff dwelling on a midsummer afternoon is not a happy accident. It is the signature of a forgotten science. These architects mastered a principle we are only now, with our advanced technology, rushing to relearn: passive climate control. They turned the entire canyon into a sophisticated, energy-free system for heating and cooling, using nothing but stone, air, and an intimate understanding of the sun. The secret lies in the concept of thermal mass. The colossal sandstone or tuff cliffs that formed their walls acted like a giant thermal battery. During the day, the thick rock absorbed the intense heat from the sun, preventing it from penetrating into the living spaces and keeping the interiors remarkably cool. Then, as the desert or plateau temperatures plummeted at night, that stored warmth would slowly radiate back inward, gently heating the rooms. This created a natural, lagged temperature regulation that smoothed out the extreme swings between day and night. It is the same principle as a cellar staying cool in summer, but executed on the scale of an entire city. They amplified this effect through brilliant orientation. At sites like Mesa Verde, entire villages were built in deep, south-facing recesses. In winter, the low-hanging sun could reach deep into the alcove, bathing the dwellings in light and warmth. In summer, the high sun was blocked by the massive rocky overhang, casting the entire city in perpetual, cooling shade. Every window and doorway was a carefully calibrated instrument, sized and placed not just for entry, but for managing light and drafting air. Ventilation was another silent engineering marvel. Many of these complexes feature carefully positioned air shafts and interior courtyards that functioned as natural wind catchers. They harnessed prevailing breezes to pull cool air through lower chambers and exhaust warm, stale air out through higher openings, creating a passive, constant airflow that prevented stagnation and maintained air quality without a single watt of electricity. This was a complete, closed-loop environmental system. The Earth itself was their primary insulator, protecting them from searing heat, biting cold, and howling winds. Contemporary architects pursuing green building certifications like LEED are essentially documenting and formalizing these ancient, intuitive practices. We are spending fortunes on complex HVAC systems and high-tech insulation to achieve what these builders accomplished with observation and stone. Their knowledge was not abstract. It was born from a lifetime of watching how shadows moved across a canyon wall, of feeling where the cool drafts originated in a cave, of understanding their local microclimate as a living, breathing partner in design. This profound environmental intelligence, this language of sun and stone, was a cultural treasure, and like so many treasures, when the culture that created it dispersed or transformed, the language was gradually forgotten, leaving only the silent, climate-controlled rooms as a testament to its existence. This mastery of a stable, resilient environment leads us to the next, even more critical pillar of their survival, a lesson in resource management that feels urgently relevant today: their revolutionary approach to water. While their walls provided perfect climate control, the true test of a canyon city's genius was its relationship with a far more fleeting resource. In these arid landscapes, water was not just a utility, it was the very currency of survival. And so, these communities became masters of a quiet, meticulous art, the harvesting of every single drop. They viewed the entire canyon watershed not as a hostile environment, but as a complex, life-giving machine to be understood and optimized. Their approach was one of profound patience and observation. They learned to read the rock, identifying natural seep lines where groundwater would weep from the sandstone after rains. They mapped the paths of every ephemeral rivulet that appeared during a storm, and then, with astonishing precision, they engineered the landscape to capture, slow, and store this precious bounty. Across these sites, you find evidence of a sophisticated, decentralized water grid carved directly into the living stone. At Mesa Verde, they constructed elaborate systems of check dams made from stone and mortar across small side canyons. These weren't meant to create large lakes, but to perform a critical function: to slow the violent rush of stormwater. By reducing its speed, the water would drop its load of silt and debris, naturally filtering itself, while simultaneously allowing more moisture to percolate deep into the soil, recharging the groundwater. The clean water was then channeled through meticulously graded stone canals into bedrock cisterns, some plastered with clay to be watertight, where it was protected from evaporation and contamination. In places like Petra, the Nabateans took this to an epic scale, carving monumental channels and dams to divert flash floods from the narrow Sick, the main entrance gorge, into a network of storage reservoirs. They even engineered ceramic pipelines to distribute water under pressure to fountains and homes. This was not a passive reliance on a rare oasis. It was an active, total management of the entire hydrological cycle. Every rooftop, every courtyard, every cliff face was part of the catchment system. They understood water as a cyclical gift, to be gently guided, patiently cleaned, and carefully banked for the long, dry seasons ahead. Modern hydrologists study these ancient systems with growing respect, seeing in them elegant solutions to our own crises of scarcity and erosion. They note how these methods prevented the destructive soil loss that plagues modern agriculture, and how they worked with natural aquifer recharge rather than depleting it with deep wells. The lesson etched into these stone gutters and cisterns is starkly clear. Our modern model often treats water as a disposable commodity, something that appears magically from a tap and vanishes down a drain. Their model was one of sacred curation. They lived within the water budget provided by their local sky, and they engineered their entire world to maximize its use. In an era of deepening droughts and overtapped rivers, this shift in perspective from consumption to stewardship, from waste to meticulous reuse, is not just a historical curiosity. It is perhaps the most vital architectural lesson these silent cities have waited millennia to teach us, and this mastery of fundamental resources raises a deeper, more haunting question. If these places were so brilliantly adapted, so perfectly in tune with their environment, why were they ultimately left behind? The answer lies not in a failure of design, but in a complex web of forces that even the most resilient architecture could not withstand. Their mastery of water and climate points to a deeper truth about these cities, a truth etched into the very floor plan. The architecture of survival was also an architecture of togetherness. Walk through the silent plazas of Cliff Palace at Mesa, Verde, or the grand processional way of Petra, and you are not just seeing buildings, you are reading a social contract carved in stone. The layout of a canyon city was a physical manifestation of its social structure, a deliberate design to weave individual lives into a resilient communal fabric. This stands in stark contrast to the isolated, single-family home model that defines so much of modern living. Here, dwellings were often stacked and interconnected, sharing walls and accessed by a network of ladders and terraces. Your neighbor was not just next door, they were literally above or below you. This proximity was not born from a lack of space, but from a profound understanding of mutual dependence. It created natural systems of informal security and shared childcare, where the community itself formed a living, watchful network. The design actively fostered what anthropologists call social cohesion. Central to this were the shared spaces, the sunken, circular chambers known as kivas in the ancestral Puebloan sites were not merely rooms, they were the beating heart of the community. Used for ceremonies, political meetings, and storytelling, these spaces solidified shared identity and passed cultural knowledge from one generation to the next. In Petra, the vast theater carved from the mountainside and the great temple complexes served a similar unifying purpose, gathering citizens for collective experience. This careful zoning of space, private sleeping quarters, shared work plazas, sacred ceremonial areas created a harmonious rhythm to daily life. It balanced the human need for individual refuge with the undeniable necessity of collective action. Maintenance of the intricate water systems, terracing of gardens on precarious slopes, and defense of the canyon entrance all required coordinated labor. The architecture made this cooperation not just possible but effortless and intuitive. Your survival was tied to your neighbors, and the city's design was a constant physical reminder of that bond. Researchers studying these blueprints note how they seem engineered for social health, actively building the relationships and support networks that prevent isolation. In our contemporary world, where loneliness is cited as a major public health concern and many neighborhoods lack a central gathering place, this ancient lesson in communal planning feels urgently relevant. It asks us a simple but profound question. Are we designing places that bring people together or that keep them comfortably apart? The canyon builders understood that a strong community was their ultimate infrastructure, more vital than any wall or cistern. This deep social cohesion, however, would face its ultimate test. The very perfection of their adaptation raises the pivotal mystery. Why would a society, so brilliantly in tune with its environment and so tightly knit, ever choose to walk away from such a masterpiece? The silent strength of these cities was not in their weapons but in their walls. Perched high on sheer cliffs or tucked behind narrow, winding gorges, their locations were masterclasses in a different kind of security. This was not the architecture of a fortress preparing for siege, but of a community designed for peace through profound psychological deterrence. The primary defense was the journey itself. Reaching a place like Cliff Palace required a difficult climb up sheer rock faces using hand and toe holds, or navigating a single, easily watched trail. The very act of approaching was a message to any potential threat, broadcasting that an attack would be costly, slow, and utterly exposed. This strategic use of terrain transformed the entire landscape into a silent guardian. Elevated vantage points allowed residents to see visitors coming from miles away, while the single-file entrances, like the famous Sick at Petra, functioned as natural choke points. One could not march an army through such a space. It forced everyone into a state of vulnerable individuality. This design achieved something remarkable. It minimized the need for a large, standing military presence. Watchtowers were often simple, integrated lookouts rather than heavy bastions. The community's security was baked into its daily rhythm. Farmers on the high terraces were also sentinels. Children playing in the courtyards were within a network of safe, interconnected homes. Life inside these secure shells was not one of constant vigilance, but of relative normalcy. Plazas for gatherings, spaces for craftwork, and areas for spiritual practice all flourished within the protected embrace of the canyon. The lesson here is profound. They created resilience not by focusing on the threat, but by thoughtfully designing the environment to discourage it altogether. They used psychology and geology in tandem. The imposing, inaccessible facade communicated safety to those within and formidable difficulty to those without. Modern urban design often grapples with security as an added layer. Think of bollards, gates, and surveillance cameras retrofitted onto existing streetscapes. The canyon cities ask us a different question. What if safety was the first principle, not the last? What if we designed neighborhoods with natural sightlines, with welcoming but intelligently laid out public spaces that foster community connection as the primary deterrent to conflict? Their approach suggests that true security stems from a deep understanding of place and the fostering of a tight-knit social fabric, where everyone has a stake in the community's well-being. It was a holistic strategy where the well-being of the whole made the need for aggressive militarization obsolete. This elegant, integrated solution to safety makes their ultimate fate all the more puzzling. For if their design was so comprehensive, protecting them from both environmental extremes and external threats, what force could possibly have been compelling enough to make them leave it all behind? The answer lies beyond the stones, in the invisible threads that connected them to a wider, changing world. Yet for all their ingenuity, these cities now stand empty. The greatest puzzle they present is not how they were built, but why they were left behind. This abandonment is the key event that severed the thread of their knowledge, transforming living wisdom into silent archaeology. A confluence of pressures likely made the canyon, once a perfect refuge, untenable. Decades of unusually severe drought could have pushed even the most brilliant water systems past their limits, slowly draining the communal reservoirs that were the lifeblood of the settlement. Resources like timber for construction or soil for the terraced gardens may have become exhausted over centuries of concentrated use. Social dynamics, perhaps strained by scarcity or influenced by new ideas from distant traders, could have prompted a collective decision to seek a different future. As families and clans gradually dispersed, migrating to new lands with different landscapes, the highly specialized knowledge of how to read a cliff face for thermal mass, or how to calibrate a check dam for a specific canyon's flow, became obsolete. This was not knowledge stored in libraries, it was lived expertise passed down through generations of practice in that very place. When the practice stopped, the knowledge began to evaporate. Master builders did not write textbooks on passive cooling. They taught their apprentices by pointing to the summer sun's path on a specific wall. Without the canyon itself as a classroom, the lessons lost their context and their urgency, fading first from daily use, then from memory. This represents one of history's quiet tragedies, the fragility of applied human genius. It shows us that technological advancement is not a guaranteed, ever upward climb. Entire libraries of environmental wisdom can vanish in a few generations if the society that stewards them undergoes a profound transition. The abandonment of these cities likely ushered in a kind of dark age for this specific architectural philosophy, a multi-generational forgetting. But here lies a spark of hope within the cautionary tale. Their very silence became a form of preservation. Because they were not torn down for new construction or built over by later cultures, these abandoned masterpieces waited, holding their secrets intact in the stone, for a time when a new civilization would arrive with fresh eyes and new questions, ready to begin the long work of rediscovery. That long silence was finally broken by the careful scrape of a trowel. The modern rediscovery of these canyon cities is not a story of treasure hunters, but of scientific detectives patiently reassembling a shattered instruction manual. Archaeology has become our bridge across the millennia, a methodical process of listening to what the stones have been trying to tell us. This is not mere digging, it is a form of slow, respectful conversation with the past. Today's researchers use tools the original builders could never have conceived of to understand the genius they took for granted. LiDAR, which uses laser pulses to map the ground through dense foliage, has revealed entire networks of terraces, canals, and roadways invisible to the naked eye, showing us that what we thought was an isolated cliff dwelling was often the core of a vast, managed landscape. From the air, these laser maps look like blueprints suddenly recovered from the earth. On the ground, the detective work grows even more intimate. Archaeologists analyze the very mortar between the stones, identifying local materials and mixing techniques that reveal resourcefulness. They study faint tool marks left by stone adzes or wooden pegs, which tell a story of craftsmanship and the specific technologies available. By mapping patterns of wall collapse and studying how weight was distributed across a cliff face, they can reverse engineer the structural logic that kept these apartments in the sky standing for centuries. Each detail is a clue. A worn step in a certain location indicates a heavily used traffic flow, hinting at social patterns. The strategic placement of a small window might align perfectly with the winter solstice sunrise, revealing an embedded astronomical knowledge. This meticulous analysis transforms anonymous rubble back into a narrative of intentional choice. We stop seeing just a room and start seeing a solution, a calculated response to a specific problem of light or heat or community need. Perhaps the most profound shift is in our understanding of their timeline. Earlier explorers often saw these sites as static, built in a single burst of effort. Modern archaeology reveals a different truth. These cities were organic, growing and adapting over generations. A wall built in one century might be modified 200 years later for a new purpose, a doorway sealed, a new level added. We can see the city learning and evolving, its architecture reflecting the accumulated wisdom of countless unnamed engineers and families. This patient work does more than satisfy historical curiosity. It actively recovers lost intellectual property. With every layer of dust carefully removed, another page of that forgotten manual on passive cooling, water stewardship, and communal design is translated. The silent stones finally find their voice, not to speak of kings and conquests, but to teach us about resilience, adaptation, and living in intelligent harmony with a place. They offer us a second chance to learn what our ancestors knew, a chance to rebuild not their specific cities, but the profound understanding that made them possible. This recovered knowledge presents us with a pressing, modern question. How do we move from admiring their ancient blueprints to applying their timeless principles in our own world? The sandstone walls of Cliff Palace hold the warmth of 1,000 winters. Perched in a vast alcove on the Colorado Plateau, this city of over 150 rooms and 23 ceremonial kivas is not a ruin in the traditional sense. It is a community paused in mid-stride, a perfectly preserved laboratory of ancient urbanism. The ancestral Puebloans who built here were not just occupants of the land, they were master interpreters of its language. They worked with the golden sandstone, shaping blocks with such precision that their walls, set with simple mud mortar, have defied gravity and erosion for more than 7 centuries. Each room was a deliberate calculation, positioned within the sheltering curve of the overhang to capture the low winter sun while evading the summer's scorching zenith. The result was a naturally regulated climate within a breathtakingly dense vertical village. Ladders connected multi-story dwellings, plazas open for shared work, and the round, subterranean kivas served as sacred anchors for community life, their very shape echoing the cycles they revered. This was high-density living long before the term existed, a model of social and spatial efficiency carved directly into the cliff face. Yet, by the 1300s, the ladders were pulled up for the last time. The people of Mesa Verde walked away from this architectural marvel, leaving behind grinding stones, pottery, and the silent structures. Their departure remains one of North America's profound historical mysteries, a decision that speaks not of failure, but of profound adaptability. Research points to a confluence of factors, including extended periods of drought that would have strained even their sophisticated water conservation systems, and the gradual depletion of local resources like timber and fertile soil after generations of concentrated habitation. Their story teaches a nuanced, critical lesson about living in balance. It shows that even the most brilliant adaptation has limits within a fixed environment. The ancestral Puebloans achieved a spectacular harmony with their immediate canyon, but they may have ultimately reached the carrying capacity of that specific place. Their legacy is therefore twofold, a testament to phenomenal ingenuity in creating a resilient life in a harsh land, and a sobering reminder that sustainability is a dynamic, long-term practice, not a permanent state. They chose to leave rather than to deplete, to migrate and reinvent rather than to cling to a masterpiece that could no longer support them. In doing so, they left behind not a ghost town, but a timeless textbook, its sandstone pages open to a chapter on knowing when to hold fast to a home and when to carry its lessons forward into a new beginning. This deep understanding of place and its limits finds a stunning parallel halfway across the world, in a city where the rock is not golden sandstone, but rose-red granite. From the golden canyons of Mesa Verde, we travel across continents to a city carved from a different palette. The approach to Petra is a lesson in dramatic revelation. You do not simply arrive, you are ushered in through a narrow, winding fissure in the mountains called the Sick, a shadowy corridor of rose-red rock that stretches for over a kilometer. This was never just a path, it was the first and most brilliant component of a monumental water system. The Nabateans, the merchant masters of this desert capital, understood that their wealth and survival depended not on fighting the harsh environment, but on conducting it. They transformed the very threat of the desert into its greatest asset. The Sick was not merely a grand entrance, it functioned as a meticulously engineered flood channel. During the rare but violent winter rains, water would surge from the surrounding highlands. Instead of letting this torrent destroy their city, the Nabateans sculpted the canyon to control it. They carved diversion dams and spillways along the Sick's length, skillfully redirecting the flash flood's destructive power into a network of underground cisterns and storage reservoirs. They line the canyon walls with ceramic pipes and carved channels, creating a pressurized distribution system that could deliver water to public fountains, lavish gardens, and even individual homes. Imagine walking through that dim, towering gorge, hearing not just the echo of your own steps, but the quiet, constant whisper of water flowing through pipes hidden within the walls, a secret lifeline in the stone. This was hydrological genius on a civic scale. Their mastery allowed Petra to become an oasis of staggering opulence in the heart of the desert, a hub for the incense trade where caravans from Arabia, India, and the Mediterranean would meet. The famous treasury, that breathtaking facade glowing in the sun, was more than a tomb or temple. It was a statement of power born from absolute control over the region's most precious commodity. The Nabateans did not just store water, they curated an entire watershed. They built dams in distant wadis to catch runoff at its source, and they plastered their countless cisterns to prevent seepage, creating a buffer that could sustain tens of thousands of people and their visiting trade partners through years of drought. Modern engineers studying their work express a deep respect, noting how their methods of slowing, spreading, and sinking water mimic the very principles we now advocate for in sustainable land management to combat desertification. Petra's lesson is stark and beautiful. It demonstrates that scarcity does not have to limit grandeur, it can inspire a higher form of creativity. The Nabateans achieved security and prosperity, not by conquering more territory to seize resources, but by perfecting the art of maximizing every drop within their own. Their empire was built not on the sword but on the siphon and the sluice gate. When their political power eventually faded and the trade routes shifted, the knowledge to maintain this exquisite hydraulic ballet was lost. The channels silted up, the cisterns cracked, and the desert slowly reclaimed its authority. Petra's silence today is the silence of a magnificent machine whose operators have long departed, leaving behind a skeleton of stone that still whispers of water. This narrative of a brilliant system falling silent connects deeply with our final case study, which takes the principle of living within the earth to its most literal and profound conclusion, not just in a canyon but beneath it. While Petra mastered the canyon, another civilization took the logic of shelter to its ultimate conclusion. They went down. Deep beneath the rolling, moon-like hills of central Turkey lies a hidden world, a testament to human ingenuity under pressure. The region of Cappadocia is famous for its fairy chimneys and rock-cut churches, but its most profound secret lies underground. Here, communities carved not just homes but entire, sprawling cities into the soft, volcanic tough rock. Derinkuyu is the most famous, a labyrinth descending over 200 feet deep, with space for an estimated 20,000 people. This was not a temporary refuge, it was a planned, permanent urban environment built in reverse from the inside of the earth outward. The driving forces were twofold: the need to escape the region's blistering summers and freezing winters, and the recurring periods of conflict that swept across the landscape. Their solution was a masterpiece of subterranean engineering. By moving life below the surface, they tapped into the Earth's most stable resource, its temperature. Just a few feet down, the ground maintains a remarkably constant coolness, insulated from the sun's scorching heat and the night's chill. The builders of Derinkuyu amplified this natural phenomenon through sheer depth. The city's many levels acted as a thermal buffer, with the deepest chambers holding a steady, comfortable temperature year-round, a perfect natural cellar for living, storing food, and preserving community. But a sealed underground city would quickly become a tomb. Their true genius is revealed in the invisible system that made life possible, the breath of the city. They engineered a complex network of ventilation shafts, some stretching from the deepest chambers all the way to the surface, cleverly disguised among the natural rock formations above. These shafts created a passive stack effect, where warmer air inside would rise and escape through higher openings, drawing cool, fresh air down through other shafts. This constant, gentle circulation prevented stagnation and provided clean air to even the lowest levels, all without a single moving part. Within this climate-controlled shell, they built a fully functional society. There were stables for livestock, chapels for worship, communal kitchens, wine and oil presses, storage rooms, and living quarters. Massive, circular stone doors could be rolled across connecting passages to seal off entire sections for security. Every element was carved from the living rock, a single, monolithic sculpture designed for survival and community. This is passive geothermal design in its purest, most ancient form. They used the Earth itself as both a blanket and a battery, creating a resilient habitat that required no external energy for heating or cooling. Modern architects studying green building look to these principles with renewed interest, exploring how Earth-sheltered homes and geothermal heat pumps can reduce our reliance on mechanical systems. Cappadocia asks us to reconsider our relationship with the ground beneath our feet. We typically see land as a platform to build upon, but they saw it as a protective cocoon to build within. Their underground cities represent a radical form of adaptation, one that traded a view of the horizon for the profound, silent stability of the deep Earth. It was a choice that preserved not just their bodies from conflict and climate, but their entire way of life through centuries of turbulence on the surface. This final case study completes a powerful trilogy of ancient wisdom, from the cliff faces of Mesa Verde to the engineered canyons of Petra, and finally into the Earth itself at Cappadocia. Each represents a different answer to the same fundamental question: how do we build a lasting sanctuary? Together, they form a forgotten curriculum on resilience. But this knowledge did not simply fade away quietly. Its disappearance created a void in our architectural history, a gap in understanding that we are only now beginning to fill. What happened to this profound way of building, and why did its lessons vanish for so long? The canyon builders' final material was the Earth itself. They understood a fundamental truth we have often forgotten, that the most sustainable building block is the one already beneath your feet. Their genius extended beyond design and into the very substance of their walls, a masterclass in local and intelligent sourcing. They did not import marble from distant quarries or smelt iron from far-off mountains. Their palette was the immediate landscape: sandstone, adobe, timber, and the soft volcanic rock called tuff. These were not second-rate choices, they were brilliant, context-specific solutions. Each material was selected not for its prestige, but for its performance within that particular environment. Sandstone, for instance, is abundant across the Colorado Plateau and possesses excellent thermal mass, slowly absorbing heat by day and releasing it at night. Adobe, a simple mix of earth, water, and straw, provided superb insulation and could be endlessly reworked and recycled. Timber from nearby pinyon and juniper trees framed ceilings and created ladders. This was a hyper-local supply chain with virtually no transportation cost and almost zero embodied energy, the total energy consumed to extract, manufacture, and deliver a material. Their entire construction process existed within a kind of circular economy. When a structure eventually fell out of use, its materials did not become toxic waste. Unfired adobe bricks could simply dissolve back into the soil. Timber beams would rot and return nutrients to the earth. Stone blocks could be reused in a new wall. The entire life cycle of the building, from creation to decay, was in harmony with the local ecosystem, leaving a remarkably light footprint. This stands in stark contrast to the modern globalized model of construction, which relies heavily on materials like steel and concrete. Producing these materials requires immense amounts of energy, often from fossil fuels, and involves complex, polluting industrial processes. They are then transported thousands of miles to a building site, burning more fuel and generating significant carbon emissions. When a modern building reaches the end of its life, its demolition often creates mountains of difficult-to-recycle debris. The ancient approach asks us a vital question: are we building with the planet or against it? Relearning the properties and potentials of local materials is not about abandoning technology, but about marrying innovation with ancient wisdom. Imagine modern engineering applied to rammed earth, or new stabilizing techniques for adobe that enhance its durability while preserving its natural benefits. This is not a step backward, but a step toward true sustainability, where structures are inherently durable because they are made from materials that have already proven their resilience in that specific place for millennia. A building of local stone breathes with the local humidity. A wall of local earth insulates according to the local temperature swings. This creates a deep, intrinsic appropriateness, a sense that the structure belongs because it literally grew from the ground it stands on. The canyon builder's material science was born of necessity and observation, a long conversation with their surroundings that yielded profound, enduring answers. Their legacy in stone challenges us to look at our own landscapes with new eyes, to see not just a site for construction, but a source of it. Their walls stand without steel reinforcement or computer models. This is the quiet marvel of their structural engineering, a science built not from abstract equations, but from generations of hands-on observation. These architects worked without the formal calculus of load and stress that defines our modern skyscrapers. Instead, they developed an empirical, intuitive understanding of forces through a long process of trial, error, and carefully passed down wisdom. They learned by doing and by remembering what worked. When they carved a room into a cliff, they were instinctively calculating. They knew to leave thick pillars of living rock at regular intervals to support the ceiling, distributing the immense weight of the mountain above. They understood the concept of the center of gravity, shaping their multi-story dwellings so that each level was carefully set back into the alcove, creating a stable, stepped profile that hugged the cliff face. This wasn't guesswork, it was a refined tradition of reading the stone itself, identifying natural fracture lines to avoid and solid bedding planes to build upon. Their techniques for cantilevered support are particularly striking. In many sites, you see rooms or balconies that project out from the main wall, supported by wooden beams anchored deep into the bedrock. The builders knew exactly how far a beam of local timber could extend before sagging, and how deep it needed to be set to resist pulling out. They compensated for lateral forces, the push and pull of wind and settlement, by tapering walls or keying stones together in interlocking patterns, creating a monolithic structure that moved as one unit rather than a collection of loose blocks. Perhaps the most profound testament to their skill is how these cities have endured the relentless tests of time. They have weathered centuries of freeze-thaw cycles where water seeps into cracks, freezes, expands, and slowly pries stone apart. They have survived seismic activity in earthquake-prone regions. Their resilience offers a treasure trove of passive data for modern engineers. By studying how these ancient walls have cracked, settled, or remained perfectly intact, researchers gain invaluable insights for contemporary seismic retrofitting and durable design. It reveals which shapes and bonding methods dissipate energy most effectively, and how flexible, monolithic structures can sway without shattering. The lesson here is not that we should abandon our advanced mathematics and materials. It is that those tools are most powerful when paired with this older form of intelligence, the wisdom that comes from deep, patient dialogue with a place and its materials. Their engineering emerged from a feedback loop with the environment itself, where a collapsed wall taught the next generation to build it thicker or to angle it differently. This tradition-based science, this cumulative genius of the hand and eye, complements our digital simulations, reminding us that sometimes the most profound stability is found not in fighting natural forces, but in understanding how to gracefully move with them. The beauty of these places was never an afterthought. It was the natural result of a problem perfectly solved. In a canyon city, you do not find decorative facades added for pure ornamentation. Instead, you find a water channel carved with a graceful, sweeping curve that minimizes friction and guides the flow more efficiently. You see the rhythmic, interlocking pattern of stone masonry, a technique that provided immense structural stability while creating a mesmerizing visual texture. The aesthetic was born directly from the necessity of the task. The most breathtaking view, the sheer drama of a city clinging to a cliff face or emerging from a narrow gorge, was itself a functional choice, a decision for security and environmental harmony that resulted in a staggering visual impact. This seamless integration challenges a modern separation we often take for granted, the idea of the engineer and the artist as two different minds. For these builders, they were one and the same. The elegance of a solution was its beauty. A vaulted ceiling in a Cappadocian underground chamber wasn't shaped for grandeur alone. Its arch distributed the weight of the earth above in the most stable way, and the resulting form possessed a solemn, graceful power. The lesson etched into these stones is that sustainability does not demand austerity. True ecological design is not about subtraction or denial, but about addition through intelligence. It proposes that when form faithfully follows function, and when that function is in deep dialogue with its context, the result is inherently moving. A building that breathes with its local climate, that harvests its own water, that is crafted from the land it sits upon, carries a dignity and a sense of rightness that a purely sculptural object often lacks. This principle is a call to today's architects and planners. It encourages them to look not to abstract trends for inspiration, but to the specific necessities of a site, its sun path, its prevailing winds, its rainfall patterns, and its native materials. The most inspiring works of our future may not be the most extravagant, but the most intelligently adapted, where every line tells a story of resourcefulness, and beauty is the signature of a problem resolved in harmony with the world. This deep connection between utility and grace leads us to a final, overarching question about the legacy of these places and the tangible blueprint they offer for our own time. A doorway was never just an opening in a wall. For the people who carved these cities from the living rock, every space held a dual purpose, serving the needs of the body while speaking to the soul. The architecture was a sacred act, a physical prayer that oriented the entire community within a larger cosmic order. This is most powerfully seen in the ancestral Puebloan kiva, the round, often subterranean chamber central to their villages. Its circular form was a direct reflection of their worldview, mirroring the shape of the world itself and the cyclical nature of life, seasons, and celestial movements. The placement of these kivas and the orientation of entire settlements was frequently aligned with precise solar and lunar events. A small window or a carefully positioned doorway might be designed to capture the first ray of the winter solstice sunrise, flooding a dark interior with a sliver of golden light on the shortest day of the year. This was not merely an astronomical calendar etched in stone, it was a profound act of connection. It tied the rhythm of their daily lives, their planting and harvesting, their ceremonies and gatherings, to the dependable, majestic cycles of the cosmos. In that moment of illuminated alignment, the boundary between the earthly home and the heavenly order dissolved. This spiritual dimension infused the most mundane activities with deeper meaning. The act of descending a ladder into the cool, quiet space of a kiva was a symbolic journey into the earth, a return to a place of origin and collective memory. The shared rituals performed there, from storytelling to ceremonial practices, reinforced social bonds and transmitted cultural values from one generation to the next. The architecture itself facilitated this, its acoustics designed to carry a leader's voice, its central fire pit representing a spiritual heart. In Petra, the monumental facades and tombs carved into the rose-red cliffs were not just displays of wealth, they were statements of eternal presence, blending the realms of the living and those who came before. The very process of carving a home from a cliff was an act of reverence, a collaboration with the spirit of the stone. This holistic view created an environment where every corner, every alignment, whispered a story of belonging and purpose. People did not just reside in these spaces, they participated in a living landscape charged with significance. Re-examining this lost layer asks a quiet but urgent question of our own time. How much of our modern built environment is designed to nourish the human spirit? We have become extraordinarily proficient at creating spaces that are physically efficient, climate-controlled, and functionally optimized. Yet, in focusing solely on utility, we often neglect this deeper dimension of experience. A canyon city teaches us that architecture at its best does not merely house us, it orients us. It tells us where we are in the world, connects us to the cycles of nature, and provides settings that foster community and contemplation. The absence of this intentionality can lead to places that feel anonymous, isolating, or spiritually barren. The ancient builders understood that the shape of a room could influence the shape of a thought, that the path of the sun through a window could mark a sacred moment. Their legacy challenges us to consider whether our own homes, neighborhoods, and cities could be designed not just for convenience, but for connection, creating frames for lives that feel anchored, meaningful, and interwoven with the world around us. This forgotten wisdom, where every stone held both a practical and a sacred purpose, points toward the ultimate value of their knowledge and what its loss truly cost us. The master builder did not leave behind a textbook. His classroom was the cliff face itself, his curriculum the feel of sandstone under a chisel, and the way winter light fell across a courtyard at dawn. The profound architectural intelligence of the canyon cities lived not on parchment, but in the hands, eyes, and stories of the community. This was a knowledge system built on oral tradition and direct apprenticeship, a living library passed from elder to youth through demonstration, song, and shared ritual. A young person learned how to mix the perfect mortar by watching their parent, understood the ideal angle for a support beam by feeling its give during construction, and grasped the sacred alignment of a doorway by hearing the stories of why it faced the rising sun on the solstice. This mode of transmission created a deeply adaptive, nuanced form of expertise. Knowledge could be refined with each generation, subtly shifting to meet new challenges in the local environment. It was wisdom inseparable from its context, fluid and responsive, yet this very strength contained a profound fragility. An unbroken chain of teachers and learners was its only lifeline. When social upheaval, migration, or other pressures caused that chain to snap, the knowledge did not go into storage, it evaporated. The intricate, practiced understanding of how to read a canyon for water, or how to shape a room for acoustic harmony, could be lost within a generation or two, leaving behind only the silent, enigmatic structures. This stands in stark contrast to other ancient traditions, like that of the Roman engineer Vitruvius, whose written manual, De Architectura, systematically preserved principles of classical design across the collapse of an empire. His words on paper survived the dispersal of his culture. The canyon builder's words on the wind did not. This is not to say one system is superior, but to highlight a critical distinction in how human knowledge can be stewarded. Oral traditions carry the spirit and adaptability of a practice, while written records can preserve its skeleton across catastrophes. For us today, this ancient vulnerability sounds a clear warning. Our modern world is still rich with indigenous and local knowledge systems, understanding of native plants, time-tested land management practices, and vernacular building techniques honed over centuries. These are often held in oral and practical traditions, vulnerable to the same forces of cultural erosion and displacement. The lesson from the silent cities is that we must actively work to document and respectfully integrate these living libraries into our formal systems of education and practice. It means listening to elders, partnering with communities, and recognizing that a scientific textbook and an ancient story can both be valid, vital chapters in the same manual for living well on this earth. By creating these bridges, we do more than preserve history. We build a more resilient, diverse, and deeply informed foundation for our own future, ensuring that the next time a society faces a great transition, the wisdom of place does not have to disappear with the people who once sang its songs. The distance between a cliff dwelling and a suburban cul-de-sac is more than just architectural. It is a fundamental difference in philosophy. One model, born of necessity, was compact, vertically integrated, and hyper-efficient with every resource. The other, born of abundance, is expansive, horizontally scattered, and often shockingly resource-intensive. Placing them side by side is not about declaring one superior, but about revealing the profound trade-offs we have made in how we build our world. The canyon city was a direct response to strict natural constraints. Water was scarce, so every drop was harvested. Timber was limited, so structures were shared. Security was paramount, so the community was tightly knit. This scarcity, paradoxically, bred incredible innovation and social cohesion. The modern suburb, by contrast, emerged in an era where fossil fuels seemed limitless, where water could be pumped from deep aquifers or diverted from distant rivers, and where the automobile promised personal freedom above all else. This abundance allowed us to ignore natural limits, to spread out across the landscape in low-density patterns that prioritize private space over public connection. The environmental outcomes of these two models could not be more different. The ancient city had a minuscule ecological footprint, its energy needs met entirely by passive solar gain and human labor, its waste absorbed by the local environment. The modern suburb requires a constant, massive input of external energy for heating, cooling, and transportation. It transforms permeable land into vast tracts of impermeable pavement, disrupting natural water cycles and contributing to urban heat islands. Its decentralized layout makes efficient public transit nearly impossible, locking in a dependency on the private car. The social outcomes are equally telling. In the canyon, daily life necessitated interaction. Shared plazas, communal water sources, and interconnected dwellings wove a fabric of mutual dependence and casual contact. In many contemporary suburbs, the design often fosters isolation. Homes are set back behind private lawns, garages face the street instead of porches, and the lack of a central, walkable gathering place means neighbors can live for years without ever having a meaningful conversation. This is not an indictment of the desire for a quiet home, but an observation of how design shapes behavior. The ancient builders understood that community was an infrastructure as vital as any wall. Our challenge today is not to recreate cliff dwellings, but to ask whether we can design new kinds of dense, livable, low-impact communities that learn from this ancient wisdom. Can we build neighborhoods that are walkable, that integrate green spaces and local water management, that use materials wisely, and that once again create natural settings for people to connect? The answer is emerging not in theory, but in practice, as a new generation of architects and planners looks to this forgotten blueprint for inspiration. The silent blueprint of the past is finding its voice in the architecture of tomorrow. Across the globe, a quiet revolution in building is underway, one that looks not to the glossy skyscrapers of the last century, but to the enduring wisdom of the cliff and the canyon. Today's most innovative sustainable designers are perhaps unknowingly becoming students of those ancient masters, proving that their lessons are not archaeological curiosities, but vital, living strategies. This modern movement takes two powerful forms: the practical revival in eco-communities and the philosophical framework of biomimicry, both pointing toward a future built on ancient foundations. Consider the Earthship home, a radical design concept that emerged from the American Southwest. Built from recycled tires packed with earth and oriented to face the southern sun, these structures use massive thermal mass walls to regulate temperature, exactly like the sandstone cliffs of Mesa Verde. They incorporate sophisticated rainwater harvesting from their curved roofs, channeling every drop into cisterns for filtration and reuse, mirroring the meticulous catchment systems of Petra. Natural ventilation shafts pull cool air from underground and exhaust warm air through rooftop vents, a direct descendant of the passive stack effect perfected in Cappadocia's underground cities. These are not primitive huts, they are high-tech applications of low-tech principles, using modern materials to execute an ancient playbook for off-grid resilience. Similarly, intentional communities known as eco-villages are consciously designing neighborhoods that embody these integrated principles. They prioritize clustered, walkable layouts that foster the social cohesion the canyon builders understood was essential, sharing resources like community gardens, workshops, and renewable energy systems. The architecture itself becomes a teacher, reminding residents daily of their connection to the sun, the rain, and each other. This practical revival is guided by a powerful overarching idea: biomimicry. This is the conscious practice of learning from and emulating nature's time-tested patterns and strategies. The canyon cities are not just historical sites to biomimicry thinkers, they are profound case studies. They demonstrate how a human settlement can function like a mature ecosystem, where waste from one process becomes food for another, where energy is harvested passively from the local environment, and where the form of a community emerges from a deep dialogue with its place. When a modern architect designs a building with a facade that opens and closes like pine cones to regulate humidity, or shapes a structure to channel wind for cooling like a termite mound, they are engaging in the same fundamental process as the ancestral puebloan reading the sun's path on a cliff. The ancient builders were intuitive biomimics, and their cities stand as monumental proof that this approach works on the scale of an entire community. We see this reinterpretation in stunning contemporary projects that embrace the earth itself. The cave house in Spain is a modern residence carved into a hillside, using the ground's constant temperature for natural cooling and heating, its organic form blending seamlessly into the landscape. Luxury hotels in Switzerland and China are built into mountainsides or buried underground, offering guests the profound quiet and thermal stability that subterranean living provides, while drastically reducing their energy needs. These are not nostalgic retreats, they are sophisticated demonstrations that earth-sheltered design can be both luxurious and radically efficient. This global reawakening to ancient wisdom signals a crucial shift. It moves the conversation beyond viewing these places as ruins to be preserved behind glass, and instead sees them as prototypes to be studied, adapted, and scaled. The lost lessons are being recovered not by archaeologists alone, but by engineers, urban planners, and everyday people choosing to build differently. They are showing us that the path to a resilient future may not lie in inventing something entirely new, but in remembering something profoundly old and having the creativity to write its next chapter. The very stones that have taught us so much are now in a race against time. These open-air classrooms, these physical blueprints of ancient genius, face a modern paradox. The same global curiosity that drives us to learn from them also brings thousands of feet, each visit leaving a microscopic but cumulative toll. The soft sandstone of Mesa Verde is vulnerable to the oils from human touch. The delicate plaster murals can fade under camera flashes, and the very vibrations from foot traffic can destabilize structures that have stood for centuries. Beyond tourism, the accelerating impacts of climate change pose a more insidious threat. Unpredictable, intense rainfall can overwhelm ancient drainage systems never designed for such deluges, leading to sudden erosion and collapse. Longer, hotter droughts stress the surrounding ecosystems, increasing the risk of wildfires that could sweep through these irreplaceable sites. This creates a profound and urgent challenge. We are in a desperate scramble to protect the very textbooks we have only just begun to read. Organizations like UNESCO, which designate these places as World Heritage Sites, are on the front lines of this delicate balancing act. Their work is not about locking these cities away, but about managing access with immense care. This means constructing viewing platforms that keep visitors at a respectful distance, limiting daily numbers, and using subtle, non-invasive monitoring technology to study the sites without touching them. Archaeologists now employ three-dimensional laser scanning to create perfect digital replicas, allowing them to study every crack and contour from a computer screen rather than risking damage by climbing on the fragile walls. Drones map erosion patterns from the air, and sensitive ground-penetrating radar peers beneath the soil without a single shovel breaking the surface. The ultimate lesson here is beautifully circular, a meta-instruction from the past. To preserve these masterpieces of sustainable living, we must ourselves practice sustainability. We must approach them with the same low-impact ethos their builders embodied. Our preservation techniques must be as gentle and intelligent as their construction methods were. This means using local materials for any necessary stabilization work, designing visitor pathways that follow natural contours to minimize disruption, and powering conservation facilities with renewable energy sourced from the sun and wind that shaped these canyons. Protecting these places is about far more than honoring a vanished culture. It is about securing a vital knowledge repository for the architects, city planners, and engineers of the future. The young student who will, in 50 years, develop a revolutionary passive cooling system for a megacity might find her inspiration in the thermal logic of a cliff dwelling. The community planner seeking to design flood-resilient neighborhoods will benefit from studying Petra's ancient hydrology. These silent cities are a library, and each crumbling wall is a page we cannot afford to lose. Their preservation is an active investment in human ingenuity, ensuring that the solutions carved in stone millennia ago remain available to inspire the solutions we must carve into our own future. This forward-looking responsibility naturally leads us to ask, how can we personally connect with this legacy? The answer lies not in distant ruins, but in the principles we can bring into our own homes and communities. Geologists and ecologists walk through these canyons and see a different kind of blueprint. Where an architect might admire a wall, a geologist reads a story of endurance written in the stone itself. They examine the specific type of sandstone or volcanic tuff, analyzing its grain size and mineral composition to understand why it could be carved so precisely yet hold its shape for 1,000 years. They map the natural fracture lines and bedding planes that the ancient builders so cleverly avoided or incorporated, learning how the city's weight was distributed to prevent collapse. By studying the patterns of erosion around these sites where water has scoured the rock above and below the dwellings, they can reconstruct ancient climate data and rainfall intensity. This geological perspective reveals that the builders possessed an intuitive mastery of their material, treating the living rock not as an inert block, but as a dynamic partner with its own strengths and weaknesses. Their success was rooted in this deep lithic literacy, a fluency in the language of stone that we have largely replaced with industrial materials whose long-term behavior we are still learning. Meanwhile, an ecologist surveys the same site and sees not a barren ruin, but the ghost of a thriving human ecosystem. They look for the subtle traces of managed landscapes. The terraces built on steep slopes were not just for planting crops, they were sophisticated tools for preventing soil erosion and capturing moisture. The check dams in small arroyos did more than collect water. They created micro-habitats, slowing runoff so that seeds could take root and small groves of trees could establish, increasing local biodiversity. The very act of concentrating water and organic matter around these human settlements likely created pockets of enhanced fertility, what scientists now call islands of resources. These communities were not separate from nature, they were active participants in it, shaping the local ecology in ways that, for a long time, supported both people and other species. This interdisciplinary view transforms our understanding. It shows that Mesa, Verde, Petra, and Cappadocia were not just architectural marvels or human settlements. They were complex, integrated socio-ecological systems. The architecture was the visible skeleton, but the living body was the intricate web of relationships between geology, water, soil, plants, animals, and people. Each element supported the others. The stable cliff provided shelter for the community, whose water management nourished the terraced gardens, whose produce sustained the people, whose cultural practices ensured the system's maintenance across generations. This holistic success depended on a systemic understanding that we have since fragmented into separate fields of study. A modern construction project might bring in a geotechnical engineer to assess the ground, and a landscape architect much later to add some plants, but rarely are ecologists, hydrologists, and climatologists equal partners from the very first sketch. The ancient model argues powerfully for a return to this integrated design thinking. It suggests that the most resilient future communities will be born from collaborations where the architect, the ecologist, and the geologist sit at the same table from day one, asking not just what can we build here, but what should this place become? This fusion of knowledge points toward a new, yet ancient, standard for how we inhabit the earth. The tight weave of their community was held together by an unspoken social grammar. Living cheek by jowl within the rock demanded more than just sturdy walls. It required a shared understanding of boundaries, of sound, of when to gather and when to withdraw. The architectural genius of these places lies not only in their physical form, but in how they sculpted the psychological experience of daily life. They created a delicate, intuitive system for managing the very human tensions of proximity. Consider the layout of a typical cliff dwelling. Personal family units were often small, intimate alcoves, sometimes just a single room carved back into the cool stone. These were private retreats, spaces for sleep, for quiet conversation, for individual refuge. Their very size enforced a certain intimacy within the family unit. Yet these private cells were never isolated. They opened onto shared terraces, plazas, and courtyards, the bustling arteries of communal life. This was the brilliant balance. The architecture provided a clear, physical choice. Step through your low doorway and you were in your own world. Step out onto the terrace and you entered the society. The design managed noise through this zoning as well. The thick stone walls of individual rooms dampened sound, creating pockets of quiet amidst the hive of activity. Meanwhile, the open plazas, often situated in the center of the alcove, were designed to carry sound, making them ideal for announcements, group work, or communal storytelling where voices could gather and mingle. This careful choreography of space addressed fundamental human needs, the need for solitude, for a place to process the day, to rest without being observed, and the equally powerful need for connection, for the reassurance of shared laughter, the coordination of tasks, the comfort of simply being around others. The builders intuitively understood that a healthy community required both. They engineered opportunities for what we might now call casual co-presence, the simple, low-pressure act of being near others without direct interaction. A person grinding corn on a sunny terrace was not alone. They were in the gentle flow of community, visible and available, yet absorbed in their own task. This reduced the psychological weight of isolation that can plague even the most crowded modern cities. Today, urban planners and psychologists studying high-density living see these ancient blueprints as remarkably advanced. In many contemporary apartment buildings, the design offers little nuance. It is a private box that opens directly onto a public hallway, with no intermediate semi-public space for casual encounter. The result can be a feeling of being either completely secluded or thrust into anonymity, with no comfortable middle ground. The canyon model suggests a different approach. What if our buildings included more of these in-between spaces, small shared terraces for a few families, interior courtyards that belong to the building's residents, not the general street? These are the spaces that build neighborly bonds naturally without forced interaction. The ancient lesson is about gradation. It is about designing a spectrum of spaces from the fully private to the fully public, with several welcoming steps in between. This architectural mindfulness supported mental well-being by giving people agency over their social exposure. In a world where urban density is only increasing, and where digital connection often substitutes for physical presence, this ancient insight into the psychology of space feels not just relevant but essential. It reminds us that the shape of our rooms quietly shapes the quality of our minds. Their entire society was powered by the sun and the slope of the land. In a world without coal, oil, or electricity, the canyon cities achieved something we now call net zero living, not through advanced technology, but through a profound conservation of energy embedded in every design choice. Their model was one of radical efficiency, where heating, cooling, lighting, and even water distribution were all managed by the architecture itself, leveraging natural forces like gravity, thermal mass, and passive solar gain. There were no furnaces to fuel, no air conditioners to power, no electric pumps to move water uphill. Comfort was engineered into the structure, a permanent feature of the place rather than a service to be switched on. This was not a life of hardship or deprivation, but one of elegant adaptation, where human needs were met by a sophisticated understanding of physics and environment. The constant, gentle climate inside a cliff dwelling was a direct result of this intelligence, a stable temperature maintained year-round by the stone's ability to absorb and release heat on a delayed cycle. Water collected on high terraces would flow down through carved channels to cisterns and gardens below, moved by gravity alone. Every task, from ventilation to food storage, was accomplished by designing with the grain of natural law. In our current era, defined by climate concern and energy insecurity, this pre-industrial achievement shifts from a historical footnote to a source of profound inspiration. It demonstrates that high-comfort living is absolutely possible with minimal external energy input, but only if we design for it from the very beginning. It challenges a core assumption of modern development, the idea that technological complexity is always superior to elegant, simple design. We have built a world that assumes cheap, abundant energy to solve every problem, from heating a poorly insulated home to pumping water across a continent. The ancient builders worked from the opposite premise. They assumed energy was precious and scarce, and so they designed systems that required almost none. This is not a call to abandon our technology, but to re-examine our priorities. Could a modern home, equipped with contemporary materials and building science, be designed to require 90% less energy for heating and cooling by first applying these ancient passive principles, and then using technology as a fine-tuner rather than a primary brute force solution? The canyon cities answer with a silent, resounding yes. They stand as proof that the most sustainable energy is the energy you never need to use, a lesson carved not in circuitry, but in stone and shadow. Their energy independence was mirrored by a quiet revolution on the slopes just outside their doors. The true sustenance of a canyon city did not come from distant trade routes alone, but from the very walls that sheltered it. Ingenious agricultural terraces cascaded down the sunlit slopes below the cliff dwellings, transforming barren, erosion-prone inclines into lush, productive gardens. These were not mere patches of dirt, they were engineered landscapes, each stone retaining wall a deliberate act of creation. By carving these stepped gardens into the hillsides, the builders solved multiple critical problems at once. They arrested the destructive force of rainwater runoff, slowing it down so the soil could drink deeply instead of being washed away. Each terrace acted as a miniature catchment basin, capturing precious silt and moisture, creating a series of fertile, level planting beds where none existed before. This manipulation of the land went even further, crafting distinct microclimates on a single hillside. A terrace higher up might be cooler and better for certain grains, while one lower down, bathed in longer sunlight and protected from wind, could support beans, squash, or even fruit trees. This was a tightly coupled system, a direct lifeline between the urban center and its food source. A resident could descend a series of ladders and paths from their high apartment to tend their family's plot and carry the harvest back up within minutes, eliminating the need for long-distance transportation and its inherent risks. This integration of agriculture directly into the urban fabric was a masterstroke of food security. The community's sustenance was literally rooted in its immediate environment, visible and accessible, making the settlement resilient to disruptions in broader supply networks. The terraces were a form of edible infrastructure, as vital to the city's survival as its water cisterns or defensive walls. Today, as we explore concepts like urban farming, rooftop gardens, and vertical hydroponics, we are essentially rediscovering this ancient imperative to blur the line between where we live and where our food grows. The lesson etched into those stone-reinforced slopes is profound. It challenges the modern model that separates city and farm by hundreds of miles of highway. It proposes a future where our settlements are designed from the start to produce a significant portion of their own nourishment, weaving food production back into the daily rhythm of community life, creating not just a more secure future, but a more connected and tangible one. But for all their eloquence, these stones tell only part of the story. The silent ruins offer no diaries, no personal letters, no recordings of daily conversation. Archaeology is by its very nature an act of interpretation, a careful reading of a text where most of the words have faded. We can measure the width of a doorway, analyze the soot on a ceiling, and map the flow of a water channel, but we cannot hear the laughter that once echoed in a courtyard or know the private worries of a parent watching the cisterns run low. The grand narratives we construct about why they built as they did, or why they ultimately left, are educated hypotheses woven from fragments. Some of the elegant lessons we so confidently attribute to them about sustainability or social design might be, in part, a reflection of our own modern anxieties and values projected onto their silent world. This is not a failure of archaeology, but its essential condition. It is a science of whispers where the wind through a canyon must stand in for 1,000 lost voices. This inherent limitation carries its own profound wisdom. It teaches us humility in the face of the past. It reminds us that our knowledge is always partial, a sketch drawn from shadows and footprints. We must be cautious in claiming definitive truths from people we can never truly interview. This humility, however, does not lead to dead ends. Instead, it redirects our attention and deepens our respect. It highlights the immense value of living traditions, of indigenous knowledge that has been stewarded and passed down through generations. In places where cultural continuity exists, the stories of elders and the practiced skills of communities can act as a living translation guide for the silent archaeology. A modern Pueblo potter's understanding of clay and water can illuminate the choices found in ancient ceramic fragments. A tradition of dryal and farming passed from grandparent to grandchild can explain the logic of a terrace system that seems merely ruinous to an outsider. This partnership between the archaeological record and enduring cultural memory offers a richer, more nuanced understanding. It cautions us against seeing these places as merely problems to be solved by engineering, and invites us to see them as homes that contain the full, complex spectrum of human experience, ambition, doubt, joy, and loss, all of which shaped the marks they left upon the stone. The final, overarching lesson may be this: to listen to the past with both the precision of science and the empathy of a guest, knowing that some of the most important answers will forever remain just beyond the reach of our trowels, lingering in the silence they chose to leave behind. Their eventual silence is perhaps their most eloquent teacher. These cities did not fail. They succeeded magnificently for generations, sometimes for centuries, within a specific and understood set of rules. Their brilliance lay in creating a perfect harmony with a particular moment in the life of their landscape. But landscapes, like histories, are not static. The very perfection of their adaptation reveals a sobering truth about resilience. It is not a permanent state you achieve, but a continuous practice of navigating change. When the parameters of their world shifted beyond a certain threshold, the very features that made them masterpieces became constraints. A water system engineered for a certain range of rainfall could not withstand a multi-generational drought of unprecedented severity. A social structure optimized for a stable population might strain under new pressures. The choice to leave was not an admission of defeat, but a final, profound act of adaptation. It was the community deciding that the cost of forcing the old model to work in a new world was greater than the cost of carrying their knowledge forward into a different form of life. This reframes our understanding of sustainability. We often think of it as building something to last forever in its current state. The canyon cities suggest a different model. Longevity comes from a combination of robust initial design and the societal capacity for intelligent transformation. The first part is about building smart, using passive principles and local materials to create a stable, efficient foundation. The second, and arguably more difficult part, is building in the capacity for change, what modern planners call adaptive capacity. This means designing systems with buffers and flexibility. It is the difference between building a wall against the river and designing a settlement that can accommodate the river's changing course. For our modern cities locked in concrete and steel, this lesson is urgent. We have built for static efficiency, assuming the climate of the past century will be the climate of the next. But as weather patterns become more volatile, the rigid systems of our metropolises are showing their strain. The ancient blueprint asks us to think differently. Can we design water infrastructure that can handle both drought and deluge? Can we create buildings that can be easily modified for new uses, or neighborhoods that can adapt their energy sources as technology evolves? It asks us to value modularity, reversible connections, and multi-purpose spaces. Most importantly, it highlights that the most critical component of resilience is not in the stone, but in the society. A community that shares knowledge, that has strong social networks, and that possesses a cultural memory of past adaptations, is far more capable of navigating crisis than a fragmented population in a technologically perfect but socially brittle city. The people of the canyon cities, when faced with a changing world they could no longer sculpt, made the ultimate adaptive choice. They carried their legacy in their stories and their skills, not in their stones. Their enduring lesson is that true sustainability includes knowing when to hold fast, when to modify, and when to gracefully let one form go so that its wisdom can find new life elsewhere. This nuanced view turns their abandonment from a mystery of collapse into a masterclass in the long arc of survival. A doorway facing the rising sun was a sentence in a story told by the ancestors. Beyond the brilliant engineering for water and warmth, these canyon cities were sacred texts carved from the living rock, their every angle and alignment woven into a people's deepest understanding of the world. The architecture was never just functional, it was a physical mythology, a narrative in stone that connected daily life to cosmic order and divine presence. For the ancestral Pueblones, the circular, subterranean kiva was far more than a meeting room. Its shape mirrored the sipapu, the symbolic entrance to the underworld from which their people emerged into this world. Descending into that space was a return to the place of origin, a ritual reconnection to the very beginning of their story. At the great Nabatean city of Petra, the towering facades were not merely tombs, they were statements of eternal presence, blending the realms of the living with the realm of the gods and the honored dead, turning the entire canyon into a monument to both earthly power and spiritual ascent. This symbolic layer was not an afterthought, it was the glue that held the community's identity together. When a builder oriented a window to catch the first sliver of light on the winter solstice, they were doing more than marking a calendar. They were demonstrating that the laws of the heavens were in harmony with the rhythms of their home. A wall shaped to echo the curve of a sacred mountain, or a plaster mural depicting the rain-bringing serpent, transformed a dwelling into a prayer. These symbolic choices reinforced an unbreakable bond with the place, teaching each new generation that they were not living on the land, but within a story authored by the forces that shaped the canyon itself. This profound integration challenges a modern separation we scarcely notice. Today, we often divorce the utility of a building from its meaning. We construct efficient shelters and then, perhaps, decorate them with art or designate a separate space for spiritual practice. The ancient model suggests something more holistic, that the structure itself can be the art and the temple. It asks whether our own homes and cities could be designed to tell a story, to connect us to a larger narrative. This does not require carving gods into cliff faces, but perhaps it means orienting a neighborhood park to frame the sunset, using local materials so a building whispers of the regional geology, or designing a public square that celebrates the history of water in that specific place. When architecture carries meaning, it elevates shelter into a landmark of cultural memory. It inspires not just occupancy, but stewardship, because people care for a place that they feel speaks to them, that tells them who they are and where they belong in the long arc of time. The silent stones of these cities remind us that the most enduring buildings are those that shelter both the body and the spirit, weaving utility and myth into a single, enduring form. The principles did not vanish without a trace. They drifted like seeds on the wind, finding new soil in distant times and places, often unrecognized by the builders who used them. While the direct, unbroken lineage of knowledge from Mesa, Verde, or Petra was severed, the fundamental solutions they embodied proved too powerful to stay buried forever. We can trace faint but unmistakable echoes of canyon logic in later architectures, a kind of architectural déjà vu where humanity stumbles upon the same answers to the same eternal questions. In the American Southwest of the early 20th century, a style known as Pueblo Revival emerged. Architects, inspired by the ruins they saw, began designing homes and public buildings with rounded corners, flat roofs, and earth-toned stucco walls that evoked the profiles of cliff dwellings. They incorporated exposed wooden beams known as vigas and built around central courtyards. While often a romantic aesthetic choice, this revival accidentally tapped into the old wisdom. The thick walls provided thermal mass, and the courtyards created private, communal outdoor space shielded from the wind, a faint memory of the sheltered alcove. Across the ocean, the traditional building forms of the Mediterranean basin, from the whitewashed villages of Greece to the thick-walled farmhouses of Italy, tell a similar story. For centuries, these cultures have built with local stone or rammed earth, their structures painted white to reflect the fierce sun, organized around central courtyards that serve as cool, shaded lungs for the home. These courtyards are not just pretty features, they are functional engines for passive cooling, drawing air through the living spaces in exactly the same way a canyon city used its plazas and ventilation shafts. The use of small, high windows to block direct summer heat while allowing winter light is another universal solution found in desert cultures from North Africa to the Middle East. These are rarely conscious homages to ancient Petra. They are independent, unconscious resurgences, different people facing the same brutal equation of sun, stone, and scarce water, arrived at remarkably similar conclusions. This pattern is profoundly revealing. It suggests that the principles of thermal mass, passive ventilation, water harvesting, and communal space are not the property of one lost culture, but are embedded in the very logic of living well in challenging environments. They are timeless responses waiting to be rediscovered by anyone who looks closely enough at the problem. This historical perspective is more than academic. It validates these ideas. When we see the same solution emerge independently across millennia and continents, it moves from being an interesting ancient technique to a verified human design principle. It tells us that orienting a building to the sun, building with local mass, and creating spaces for community are not nostalgic fantasies but hard-won, universal truths about durable habitation. The discontinuity of their history, however, carries a warning. When these principles resurface unconsciously as mere style or vernacular habit, they are vulnerable to being diluted or lost again in the next wave of fashion. The Pueblo Revival home might have the right look, but if its thick walls are just a veneer over standard frame construction, and its courtyard is not used to manage airflow, the principle is merely a costume. The modern task, then, is to move from accidental echo to deliberate application. By consciously tracing these threads through history, we can reclaim this knowledge not as a forgotten secret, but as a confirmed, reliable toolkit. We can choose to reincorporate these principles with full understanding, marrying them with our modern materials and engineering to build a future that doesn't just look to the past, but thoughtfully converses with it. This conscious revival turns historical curiosity into a powerful design mandate, ensuring that the next time we build a city, we are not starting from scratch, but adding a new, informed verse to a very old song. Laser light now traces the same contours once shaped by stone tools. This is the new conversation with the past, a dialogue conducted not with trowels and brushes alone, but with the silent hum of drones and the precise sweep of laser scanners. Modern technology is performing a kind of digital archaeology, building a bridge of light and data back to the minds of the ancient architects. Tools like three-dimensional laser scanning, known as LiDAR, allow researchers to map every crack, every subtle curve of a cliff dwelling, creating a point cloud of data so accurate it can measure the wear on a single step. From this data, they build immaculate digital twins, perfect virtual replicas of structures that are too fragile to touch. This changes everything. Suddenly, we are no longer just observers from a distance. Wearing a virtual reality headset, an engineer can stand in the center of a digitally resurrected plaza, look up at the multi-story walls, and understand the spatial relationships in a visceral, intuitive way. They can test theories without risking a single stone. What happens if we simulate a century of water flow against that foundation wall? How would this ceiling beam react to a seismic tremor? These digital models allow for endless, non-destructive experimentation, letting us reverse engineer the builder's decisions with a clarity that physical excavation alone could never provide. We can visualize the construction sequence, watching a city emerge from the rock in a sped-up digital timeline, revealing the logical order of operations that turned a cliff into a community. This technological bridge does more than aid researchers. It democratizes wonder. High-resolution drone photography captures sweeping vistas of inaccessible sites, sharing views once reserved for the most daring climbers. Interactive online archives allow students on the other side of the world to explore a Cappadocian city room by room, spinning the model to see how a ventilation shaft connects from the surface to the deepest chamber. These digital records also become a vital preservation tool, a permanent backup of a site's current state, invaluable if the physical structure is ever damaged by time or the elements. This fusion is where the true lesson crystallizes. It is not about replacing the wisdom of the past with the gadgets of the present. It is about using our most advanced tools to listen more carefully to the oldest voices in the stone. The laser scanner provides the question, and the ancient wall holds the answer. When we pair a thermal imaging camera's readout with the intuitive placement of a window designed 1,000 years ago, we are witnessing a conversation across time. The ultimate blueprint for our future may well be this partnership, where artificial intelligence helps us analyze patterns in ancient water management, and satellite data guides us to forgotten terrace systems, all in service of relearning how to live within our means. The past holds the proven principles, and the future offers the tools to understand and scale them. Our present challenge is to be the generation that finally facilitates that introduction, using the light of our technology to illuminate the enduring genius in the shadow of the canyon. No one received a paycheck for carving a room from the cliff. The monumental effort required to build these cities, moving thousands of tons of stone and earth, presents a quiet economic mystery. In a world without currency, without banks or corporate contracts, what motivated an entire community to invest years of their lives in such a shared endeavor? The answer lies in a form of wealth we have often undervalued, an economy built not on coins but on trust, obligation, and the undeniable arithmetic of shared survival. This was an economic model powered by social capital. Labor was likely organized through intricate systems of reciprocal exchange, where helping your neighbor build their wall today meant they would help you terrace your garden tomorrow. It was woven into the fabric of ritual and spiritual life, where contributing to the construction of a ceremonial kiva or a vital water channel was not a chore, but a sacred duty that strengthened one's standing and ensured the favor of the forces that brought rain. In some cases, particularly for the largest, most coordinated projects like Petra's monumental facades or Cappadocia's deepest excavations, a form of centralized leadership may have directed labor, perhaps supported by the surplus wealth from trade or tribute. But even then, the currency was not money, it was authority granted by the community for the common good. This system challenges a foundational assumption of our modern world, that large-scale, complex projects require the incentive of financial profit or wage labor. Their cities stand as proof that human beings are equally capable of being motivated by collective purpose, by the desire for security for one's family and neighbors, and by the deep-seated need to contribute to something that will outlast a single lifetime. The investment was in the community itself. Every stone laid was a deposit into a bank of mutual security. Every canal dug was an investment in the future harvests of all. This redefines what we consider an economy. It was an economy of care where the primary resources were relationships, shared knowledge, and a unified vision for resilience. For us today, this perspective reframes how we view public works and community-led projects. We often see top-down funding or private investment as the only engines for large-scale change. The ancient model suggests another path, one where the most valuable resource is already present, the social fabric of the community itself. Modern examples of community land trusts, cooperative housing developments, and volunteer-driven ecological restoration projects are, in a way, rediscovering this ancient economic principle. They demonstrate that when people feel a direct stake in the outcome, when they are building a legacy for their own children alongside their neighbors, labor transforms from a cost into a contribution. The silent stones of these cities ask us a provocative question. What grand projects for a sustainable future could we undertake if we learned to better value and mobilize our social capital, our shared purpose, as our most powerful currency? A whisper could travel the length of a canyon plaza without ever losing its shape. Beyond the visual drama of these cities lies a hidden layer of genius, an architecture not just of space but of sound. The natural amphitheaters formed by curved cliff faces and the enclosed, resonant chambers of their plazas created meticulously tuned acoustic environments. This was no accident of geology, but a feature either deliberately harnessed or intuitively embraced by the builders. In a place like the Cliff Palace at Mesa Verde, the hard, smooth surfaces of the sandstone alcove acted as a natural sound reflector. A leader speaking from a central kiva could be heard clearly by dozens of people gathered on the surrounding terraces, their voice carried and amplified by the very rock that sheltered them. This acoustic design served every facet of life. For daily communication, it meant a mother could call her children from a distance without shouting, her voice carried on the still air of the canyon. For security, it allowed sentries to hear the faintest echo of an approaching footfall long before a visitor came into view, but its most profound purpose was ceremonial. In these spaces, music and chant were transformed. The rhythmic beat of a drum would not just be heard, it would be felt, a vibration rising from the stone floor and resonating in the chest. A collective prayer or story song would swell and linger, filling the entire alcove with a unified voice that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. This sonic environment deepened the spiritual experience, making the intangible palpable and weaving individual participants into a single, resonant body. It was a tool for emotional and social cohesion, as powerful as any shared meal or common task. Studying these ancient soundscapes shifts our modern perspective on design. We have become overwhelmingly visual creatures, prioritizing how a building looks over how it feels, sounds, or even smells. We fill our spaces with sound-absorbing materials to create quiet, but often at the cost of creating dead, lifeless acoustics that stifle connection. The canyon builders understood that controlling sound was essential for a livable community. They created zones of acoustic intimacy for private conversation within family rooms and zones of public resonance for gathering and ceremony. This subtle mastery reminds us that architecture is a full-body experience. A truly welcoming space considers the whisper and the echo, the way sound can either isolate us or bring us together. It asks whether our own homes and public squares could be designed with a more thoughtful ear, creating places where conversation flows easily, where music feels alive, and where a moment of shared silence can be as profound as any spoken word. A grinding stone left in a sunlit corner tells a quiet story about a day's work. The silent architecture of these cities holds more than just engineering secrets. It contains subtle, debated clues about the people who lived there and how they organized their daily lives. By carefully reading the placement of objects and the function of rooms, archaeologists can begin to interpret social structures, including possible roles based on gender. For instance, the consistent location of heavy grinding stones called metates in specific, often shared courtyards or terraces, suggests that food preparation was a central communal activity. While we cannot know the exact social rules, the design implies this labor was visible and integrated into the flow of community life, rather than isolated in private, hidden kitchens. Similarly, the most sacred spaces, like the kivas, were likely accessed according to complex social and ceremonial protocols that may have defined roles for different members of the community. These spaces were not open to all at all times. Their very architecture controlled access and participation. This careful reading teaches us a fundamental truth: architecture is never a neutral container. The way we shape space actively encodes and reinforces social norms, values, and hierarchies. A doorway that is too narrow, a room that is deliberately secluded, or a plaza designed for gathering. Each makes a statement about who belongs where and for what purpose. The ancient builders understood this power intuitively. Their designs fostered incredible social cohesion through shared plazas and interconnected dwellings, yet they also almost certainly reflected and solidified the specific social order of their time, which likely included distinct roles and responsibilities. For us today, this offers a dual lesson as we aim to design more equitable modern spaces. We can be inspired by the inclusive potential of their communal areas, those open terraces and central plazas that brought people together for work and ceremony. These spaces demonstrate how design can actively encourage connection and shared responsibility. Yet we must also learn from the need to critically examine our own blueprints. Just as we now study their floor plans to understand their social world, future generations will read our buildings. Do our homes, offices, and cities design people in or out? Do they create natural opportunities for collaboration across traditional divides, or do they silently perpetuate isolation and inequality? The silent stones remind us that every wall we build is also a social statement. The ultimate power of design lies not just in sheltering bodies, but in shaping the society those bodies create. The principles are timeless, but their transmission must be deliberate. To ensure these architectural lessons become permanent fixtures in our collective knowledge, they must move from the realm of fascinating documentary into the core of professional education. Imagine a university-designed studio where the semester's central challenge is not a theoretical skyscraper, but a modern reinterpretation of a cliff dwelling. Students of architecture, engineering, and urban planning would be tasked with creating a residential community for a specific, harsh climate using only passive systems and locally sourced materials, with Mesa, Verde, or Petra as their primary reference texts. This shifts the ancient cities from being historical curiosities in a textbook's final chapter to being foundational case studies for 21st century problem solving. The assignment would force a deep engagement with the real-world physics of thermal mass, the calculus of watershed management, and the social geometry of shared space. It teaches that sustainability is not an optional add-on, a few solar panels slapped onto a conventional blueprint, but the very genesis of intelligent form. This educational integration creates a new kind of professional, one who enters the field fluent in the language of sun paths and prevailing winds, who sees a building site not as a blank slate, but as a partner in a conversation that began millennia ago. The goal is to make this wisdom so ingrained that it becomes second nature, the obvious first step rather than a nostalgic afterthought. Yet, for this knowledge to truly reshape our world, it cannot remain solely within academic circles. The broader public must also become conversant in this forgotten language. This is where museums and media play a vital role. Interactive exhibits that let visitors feel the temperature difference between a sun-baked rock and the cool interior of a replica cliff dwelling, or documentaries that use stunning visualizations to show how Petra's water channels function, transform abstract concepts into tangible, awe-inspiring experiences. When people understand that their own comfort and security can be engineered so elegantly without massive energy consumption, it changes their expectations. They begin to ask different questions of their own homes and cities. Why does my house need so much air conditioning? Could our neighborhood collect its own rainwater? This public awareness creates a demand for the very solutions the ancient builders perfected, pushing the market and policymakers toward more resilient, intelligent design. By weaving these lessons into both professional training and public understanding, we break the historical cycle of loss and rediscovery. We build a continuous lineage where the genius of the past is not a relic to be occasionally unearthed, but a living, evolving toolkit, permanently checked out from the library of human experience and actively used to draft the blueprint for tomorrow. For all our laser scans and satellite maps, the deepest chambers of these cities remain inaccessible. We can calculate the angle of a solstice sunrise on a wall, but we cannot feel the collective awe that filled the plaza when that golden light finally arrived. We can reconstruct a water channel's path, but we cannot know the personal relief of a farmer hearing that first trickle after a long drought. The precise moment of a crucial innovation, the name of the master builder who first saw a home in a crack in the cliff, the private hopes and quiet struggles of the families who lived there, these are frequencies lost to the static of time. Our science brilliantly illuminates the what and the how, but the living why, the human heartbeat within the stone, often eludes us. This enduring gap is not a failure of archaeology, it is its most profound truth. It teaches us a necessary humility. We must acknowledge that the people who carved these cities possessed a fullness of knowledge, a nuanced understanding of their world woven from daily experience, spiritual belief, and generational memory that we can only glimpse in fragments. To assume we have fully decoded their genius with our instruments is a form of technological arrogance. It risks reducing their holistic, lived wisdom to a series of engineering bullet points, missing the cultural symphony that gave those points meaning. This humility reframes our entire endeavor. It turns exploration from a conquest where we march in to extract answers into a patient dialogue. We are not just studying ruins, we are listening for echoes. This respectful posture is especially crucial when engaging with living cultures whose traditional knowledge systems are the direct, enduring relatives of those ancient practices. The wisdom of indigenous elders about local plants, water sources, and land stewardship is not anecdotal folklore. It is a continuous, refined data set passed down across hundreds of human generations. When a modern hydrologist partners with a Pueblo waterkeeper to understand an ancient catchment system, that is when the dialogue becomes richest. It combines the power of satellite imagery with the depth of oral history, creating a more complete picture. The silent stones, in their refusal to give up every secret, issue a quiet call. They remind us that learning is not a destination, but a continuous, open-ended journey. They encourage us to approach the past and the traditional knowledge of the present, not as superiors who have figured it all out, but as curious students, ready to listen as much as we measure, ensuring that our rediscovery of ancient wisdom is guided by respect as much as by intellect. The silent stones have spoken a coherent language across continents and centuries. Their lessons are not a random collection of clever tricks, but a unified philosophy, a complete operating system for how to build a lasting home. Synthesizing their wisdom, we can distill 5 core principles that form a new yet ancient blueprint for architecture. First, deep integration with the site. This is not just placing a building on land, but listening to its contours, its sun, its winds, and its geology, allowing the place itself to dictate the fundamental form. Second, passive environmental control, using the mass and orientation of materials to create stable, comfortable interiors without constant energy input. Third, circular systems for water and materials, treating every drop as a treasure to be endlessly cycled, and every building block as part of a local, regenerative loop. Fourth, design for social cohesion, where architecture actively weaves individual lives into a supportive communal fabric through shared spaces and intelligent proximity. And fifth, resilience through adaptability, building not for a static forever, but with the flexibility to evolve as the world inevitably changes. These principles are deeply interconnected. A building integrated with its site naturally enables passive control. Circular water systems reinforce community interdependence. Social cohesion provides the human capacity for adaptation. This is not a checklist, but an ecosystem of ideas where each part strengthens the others. This synthesized philosophy provides a robust framework for rethinking everything, from a single-family home to a sprawling megacity. It invites a fundamental paradigm shift. Instead of seeing ourselves as separate from nature, building fortresses against it, we begin to see our settlements as careful, intelligent interventions within a living system. We become participants in a dialogue with the land, not conquerors of it. A modern home designed this way would not just have solar panels, it would be shaped by the path of the sun. A neighborhood would not just have pipes, it would be designed as an integrated watershed. A city would not just contain parks, it would function as an urban ecosystem. This shift moves sustainability from a technical add-on to the very origin of design. It asks us to measure success not by square footage alone, but by how little energy a building needs, how securely it manages its own water, how strongly it connects its residents, and how gracefully it can change over time. The abandoned cities offer this not as a nostalgic fantasy, but as a proven, practical template. They stand as monumental evidence that this way of building works, that it can create places of profound beauty, security, and community that endure for centuries. Their silence now breaks into a clear, compelling question. Are we ready to listen and to write the next chapter of their story with the materials and challenges of our own age? These silent stones are not tombstones but timeless textbooks. As we conclude this exploration, it is vital to remember that these abandoned canyon cities are not monuments to failure, but to a profound and enduring success. They succeeded in their purpose for generations, sheltering communities, fostering culture, and standing firm against the elements. Their eventual quiet is not a mark of defeat, but a testament to a different kind of victory, the wisdom to adapt and move on when the world changed. What they left behind is far more valuable than any treasure. It is a library of architectural genius, its shelves carved from the living rock, holding volumes on passive design, water stewardship, and social harmony that have waited patiently for us to read them again. The very fact that they stand at all, enduring centuries of wind and weather long after their builders departed, is the ultimate proof of concept. Their resilience is the lesson. In an era of deepening climate uncertainty and social fragmentation, the principles they display of true sustainability, genuine community, and flexible resilience are not historical curiosities. They are the precise, practical wisdom we need to navigate our own future. They offer a blueprint not for going backward, but for moving forward more intelligently. Let these ancient wonders inspire you to look at the built world around you with new, critical eyes. Question the assumptions of our disposable, energy-hungry model. Why must a home fight its local climate instead of working with it? Why do so many neighborhoods lack a true heart where people can connect, advocate for designs, both big and small, that honor the delicate balance between people and planet, that build for longevity, not just profit, and that remember the human need for both sanctuary and society? The conversation between humanity and habitat is an ancient one, and these cities show us how eloquent that dialogue can be. If you found this journey into lost wisdom valuable, please subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries history has left behind. And we would love to hear your thoughts. Which architectural lesson from these silent libraries do you find most relevant for our world today? Share your perspective in the comments below.